in the community. We're live there shortly for details. Also, this afternoon, demoted Asin North MP James Chachikwesin takes on judiciary over what he says are inconsistencies in the processes leading to the annulment of the elections which took him to Parliament. The former MP says he will contest the by-election to reclaim the Asin North seat, and much later, cumulative increases in water and electricity tariff for second quarter of the year take effect from today. We hear from some businesses on how they intend to cope with the tariff hike. We have details of these stories and a lot more if you stay with us for the next 30 minutes. A pleasure that you could be a part of this afternoon's bulletin. Is streaming live on Facebook at handles 3FM927 as well as on Twitter, same handles 3FM927. I am Eric Mawuena Egbeta. Let's get into the details. We're starting from northern Ghana, where heavy security comprising police and military have been deployed to Lukula, a farming community in the North Gonja district of the Savannah region, following renewed conflict between Mamprusis and Gonjas, the two ethnic groups in the community have been engaged in decades-old land dispute with intermittent outbreak of violence. Last year, 6 people died in the area with several properties destroyed. Reports from the community this morning indicate exchange of gunshots with residents, especially women and children fleeing to safety. And we'll get details shortly if you stay with us here on 3FM 92.7. But let's bring you another top story this afternoon, which has to do with Asin North MP James, the former Asin North MP rather, James Chachikwesin, because Supreme Court on May 31, amongst many things, May 17 rather, ruled that, or affirmed the decision of the Cape Coast High Court in annulling his election, and he has questioned what he says are inconsistencies by the country's judiciary during the trial to have his election annulled. The now former MP had his name expunged from the records of the legislature when the Supreme Court on May 17 affirmed the Cape Coast ruling, like I've been telling you, which took him to Parliament. The Electoral Commission has subsequently set June 27 as date for the by-election, announcing his intention to contest the said elections. Mr. Chachikwesin raised objections as to why he was consistently denied the chance to seek interpretation from the various levels of the country's judiciary. Komola Kluche is our parliamentary affairs correspondent. He's joining us in studio with some more details as to that statement that's come through from James Chachikwesin. So Komola, he's confirmed his decision to contest, but with reservations of how he was treated during the court processes. Exactly what does he say?
Well, James Chachikwesin has been saying that since last year, April, when the Supreme Court stopped him from performing his duties as the representative in Parliament for the people of Asin North, they have been without representation in the 8th Parliament of the 4th Republic. And he went on to say that, like the people of the South traditional areas who are excluded from representation in this Parliament, they, the people of Asin North, to have been in that unacceptable situation for over a year. And he went on to say that democracy must be restored, and he's urging them all to come out in their numbers to vote for him so that he returns to Parliament and continue the work that he's begun to do on their behalf towards advancing the cause of the Asin North development. Then he went on also to say that he knows that the people are battle ready for the by-election, and that when it comes to the voting, they would come out in their numbers and give him the nod.
So that's it in terms of what he says, but let's look ahead to the by-election and the possible ramifications, because this will be keenly contested as it has rippling effect on the numbers in Parliament as well.
Of course, I mean, if the NDC as it stands now, they are 136, whilst the MPP is 137 plus 1 independent. So if the NDC wins it, then it comes back to what it used to be in the past until Chachikwesin was rendered persona non grata by the Supreme Court, which has been upheld also by the Speaker. Now, what it means also is that if the MPP should win it, then they would advance further with an additional number of seats that will make them 139 then, or 138 plus one independent. Now, what is the history also of the Asin North constituency? Now, this is a constituency that was created in 2012. The NDC won it in 2012. The NPP won it in 2016, and the NDC won it back in the 2020 elections with Jachi Kwesen. Don't forget that it was carved out of the then Asin North constituency that encompassed the Asin North and then Asin Central constituency, which was held by Kennedy Japan.
Right.
But from observation, looking at the trend of voting, that is at the northern side, and it's one of the settler communities within that enclave that did not give much vote to Kennedy Japan or the NPP. But we must also state and then emphasize that in the 2020 elections, Jachi Kwesen won it by 17,498 votes, as against Abena Drowa Mensah of the NPP, who won it 14,193, which is just a difference of 3,000. The president, as we speak now, the president of the Republic, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, won that election by 16,067, whilst John Dramani Mahama won it by 15,014. Right. So it tells you the dynamics are that close. So it's just a difference of 3,000 votes that they need. But we know that a lot of people may not necessarily, looking at the trend, I mean, just about a week or so ago, the Kumawu by-election, what will be the turnout?
Low turnouts was recorded.
Yes, if that is recorded, then the numbers would also be a bit shaky. But with what it is that we are seeing, a lot of people have a much interest in this, especially the opposition. The NPP wants to hold this particular seat, which they lost in 2020, because it plays a very huge role when it comes to decisions that they should be taken within the legislature.
Right, then that's Komla Kluche, is our parliamentary affairs correspondent. Musa Dankwa is the executive director of Global Info Analytics. He's joined us on phone as well for a quick conversation. Many thanks for speaking to us. You are the man who's been in charge of polls in the country in the last few years and months. What is it looking like for the Asin North constituency?
Right, thank you very much. Asin North will be very keenly contested. And as we are aware, NDC has won it twice since 2012 and MPP 2016. But as you mentioned, NDC won it with about 10% margin in 2020. The question is, will the MPP be able to overhaul this margin and swing the seat back to MPP, or NDC will hold it against the pressure that is coming under from the MP. Now, if you look at the work we've done very recently, as far back as April, in the April poll, there were some indications that it would be a tough race for the MPP. If you look at the people who are saying that the country is headed in the wrong direction, it's about 77% in that constituency.
Right.
If you look at those who are saying that they're not optimistic about the future, it's about 80%. So some of the numbers we've seen doesn't seem to support an assertion that MPP could win the seat. It might be for NDC to lose at this stage of the race.
So the governing New Patriotic Party have it all to do if they want to capture the seat?
Absolutely. The numbers are looking quite dim. And normally you see with by-elections, they tend to take national character. Instead of local issues determining the outcome of the by-election, voters normally tend to use by-election as an opportunity to either reward or punish government, depending upon what they feel. And at the moment, the numbers appear to be that they may punish the government.
Right then, Musa, I appreciate that you could speak to us. That's Musa Dankwa. He's the Executive Director of Global Info Analytics, speaking to us this afternoon. You're listening to the news here on 3FM 92.7. We're taking you now to our top story for this afternoon, which has to do with the deployment of heavy security personnel involving the police and the military to the Lukula farming community in the North Gonja district of the Savannah region following renewed conflicts there between Mamprosis and the Gonjas. The two ethnic groups, like we've been telling you, in the community have been engaged in decades-old land dispute with intermittent outbreak of violence. Last year, 6 people died in the area with several properties destroyed, and reports, as we've picked up from the community this morning, indicates the exchange of gunshots with residents, especially women and children, fleeing to safety. Christopher Mwako is our colleague. He's moved to the Lukula community to get us a lot more details, and we'll seek to find out whether the hostilities have ceased and whether or not something is being done, whether individuals have been arrested in connection to the gunshots that we've heard this morning in the Lukula community. We're working the telephone lines to connect with Christopher Mwako, as the situation remains a tensed one where he is at this particular point. He'll join us on phone pretty shortly with some details, but from that James Jachikwe, let's just stay with matters from the Supreme Court, because the court on Wednesday, May 31, ruled that President Akufo-Addo's appointment of an acting Auditor General, Johnson Ekuyama, was unconstitutional. It can be recalled that President Akufo-Addo appointed the acting Auditor General after asking the former Auditor General Daniel Yao Domelevo to proceed on his accumulated 123 days leave on Wednesday, July 1, 2020. But with the latest Supreme Court ruling, what then becomes of the actions taken by Johnson Ekuyama while he was in that acting capacity, because the court ruled that that appointment was unconstitutional? Vitus Bang is a private legal practitioner and a law lecturer. He will provide some more education for us if you stay with us here on 3FM 92.7, as well as numerous affiliates across the country. But let's talk utility tariffs now, because you would be required to pay a lot more for electricity as the airport review of tariffs takes effect today. The Public Utilities and Regulatory Commission, in its quarterly review, increased electricity tariff by 18.36% across board for the second quarter of 2023. Business owners are dreading the impact the increment will have on the operations. My colleague Aisha Yakubu visited a number of them and reports.
Double the sweat, double the work. That is what some businesses hope to do to make up the 18% increment in electricity in order to stay afloat. The PULC has attributed the 18% increase to the cedi depreciation, high inflation, electricity generation mix, amongst other factors. However, businesses which rely primarily on electricity are dreading the increase. Isaac Entry manages a printing press along the streets of Accra New Town.
Even to get a job is not easy. And when you get a job, because of the materials, the price of materials, and now we are going to increase the electricity bills, it will affect us a lot. Maybe you can negotiate with the customer, he will understand. At times, some of them will not understand you. So you have to take the old price. At times, when you increase the price, they will not come. They will go to a different place.
He might have to cut down staff strength to sustain his business.
You have to pay more than 5 or 6, 7 people, and our bills are going higher, and the job is not coming. At times, I will let some of them go house because we can't afford to pay workers without getting job.
For someone who has been in the cold store business for more than 2 decades, Auntie Stephanie says she's facing her most difficult time yet.
Very tough.
Things are going to get worse for us. We already spend 500 cedis a week on electricity alone. How can we deal with this increment?
The new increment will gravely affect her clientele.
That means we have to increase prices for the clients, and they will not accept it too.
Mariam also heads a fashion business, and her story is no different.
The industrial machines pull a lot of electricity, so
when we don't have lights and our light is cut out, we would have to buy it. And the 18% will definitely affect us. Increasing 18% is too much. So we would have to increase our price a bit. So it will definitely affect our customers too.
She's pleading for the percentage to be reduced.
At least maybe 3% to 5% is okay, but 18% is way above our limits.
The 18.36% increment takes effect on June 1, and for these businesses, their only hope is to stay afloat.
Aisha Yakubu Halet, my colleague, with that report. Let us know what you think as we're streaming live on Facebook. Our handles 3FM927, same handles on Twitter as well. These are upward reviews of electricity tariff and exactly how it will affect you as a Ghanaian. If you own a business, leave a message in the comment section of the stream and we'll try and read it out for the many of the Ghanaians who continue to listen to the news bulletin. But we'll move away from this, and pensioner bondholders, they are defying the rains in the capital this morning to picket at the country's finance ministry in demand of payment of their matured coupons and bonds. Members of the forum suspended their picketing on May 12 of the meeting the finance ministry to have all outstanding coupons paid. 3 weeks down the line, the pensioners say they're being forced to return again to the ministry as all the outstanding demands are still yet to be met. Convener of the pensioner bondholders forum, Dr. Edwan Anientri, has been speaking to 3FM.
The rain is worrying us, but we are getting there.
Rain is worrying you, but you're getting there. We know the last time you suspended the picketing, there were some assurances by government. What happened between now and then?
Well, the assurances were partially met. We said until the full assurances are met, we're going to resume our picketing. And lo and behold, we didn't get all the assurance being met, so we are picketing today. We are resuming today.
When you say partially met, exactly what do you mean?
What government did was to pay the coupons, not even all. Government paid the coupons and left 2. And as at now, 3 more coupons has also become due, making it 5. And our principals, that has been due for over 100 days. The ministry said they were going to engage us and decide, take a decision on how the government was going to give us back our money. We wrote to the ministry to let us have the meeting the week that we suspended the picketing, the first week, to let us have the meeting by 19th. We didn't hear from the ministry, so the ministry they didn't call the meeting. They wanted us to meet. Now we say let's meet, and we're not meeting yet. Then we gave them another week, ending the 29th of this month, that they should let us have the meeting. That was last Friday. Yes, still the meeting was not called. We didn't hear from anywhere from them, even though we have written the letter. All these things, the 2 days that we said we should meet, we have written letter. No response, nothing heard from the ministry. And so we say, well, we even told you as soon as you renege on even one of the conclusions, we will resume. So we just have to inform the police that we will resume.
That's Dr. Edwan Anientri's convener of the Pensioner Bondholders Forum. We'll get details as to how that panned out much later. Let's take you to the Lukulu community now, and where, like we mentioned, Lukula farming community, where there's been gunshots heard there this morning. Christopher Mwako is my colleague there. He's joined us on phone. Chris, do we know if the hostilities and all of the gunshots have ceased?
Yes, Mawuena, for now, there is some relative calm in the Lukula community because the Savannah Regional Security Council and the North Gonja District Security Committee have intervened by deploying security to the area. So there is some relative calm there. But my source in the Lukula community tells me that there are still some sporadic shooting in the Lukula community.
And do we know what sparked the latest clashes as we've been witnessing all morning?
Yes, so Mawuena, it's been an annual thing that happens in the area because since 2019 till date, every year there is some sort of this reoccurrence of the land and chieftaincy dispute in the Lukula community. In August 2019, for instance, when it started, some 2 persons died out of it. 34 houses were torched, and several others fled the community. For 2020, when it happened, there wasn't any death recorded. But 2021, it happened again, and 1 person died. Last year, 2022, it happened, and 2 persons died, lost their lives out of the issue. 2 were arrested, and 59 houses were torched. This year, 2023, it has happened again, and it's on the same issue, and it always happens around the farming season when the farmers are preparing their lands for the next farming season. Because of the dispute that has to do with the land issues, the people are always in arms against each other around this time.
You mentioned earlier arrests and other things in relation to that. Does it look like these individuals who were picked up earlier have been prosecuted to serve as any deterrent? And in terms of the security situation, what is it like as we speak? As you mentioned that there are still sporadic gunshots.
Yes, so Mawuena, when the 2 were picked up, as we speak now, the 2 are working free men because they were bailed, and we don't even know what is happening to the case as it stands now. But according to the district chief executive for North Gonja, Adam Iliasu, they are putting in place measures to ensure that there is a long-lasting peace in the community. Because previously, when the issues break up and they send the security there, when calm is restored, they move the security out of the area. But this time he's assuring that the security are going to be there for a very long time to ensure that they get a long-lasting solution to the conflict situation in the Lukula area.
Christopher Marco there, my colleague in the northern region, providing details there for us. Let's return to one of the stories we've been bringing to you in relation to that ruling by the Supreme Court yesterday in describing as unconstitutional the president's decision to have former Auditor General Daniel Yao Domelevo to proceed on leave. Well, one of the consequential orders that have come from that ruling was that the substantive appointment for the acting position of the Auditor General in the person of Johnson Akua was illegal. That raises questions about what becomes of the actions as taken by Johnson Akua while he was in that acting capacity and was seeking to get some legal education from private legal practitioner Vitus Bang. He's joined us on the telephone line with some more details. Many thanks, counsel, for speaking to us. So the court says his appointment was illegal. Where does this leave the actions and reports he has authored as an acting Auditor General?
Yeah, good afternoon to your listeners. Indeed, the reports and audits conducted by the Auditor General whose appointment has been declared as unconstitutional are likely to be held to be valid acts done by that office and will be deemed regular, even though the appointment of the Auditor General in question has been declared as unconstitutional. If that were not to be the case, it was going to lead to some kind of constitutional crisis because the Auditor General has performed the duties of that office, audited several public accounts and other public offices, and has submitted same to Parliament and all of that. It will be very difficult for a court of law to say that all those acts performed by even people who work under him would be said to be invalid. If that were to be the case, it's going to lead to some constitutional crisis. So yes, those acts are likely to be held to be valid, except that he, as a person, if he wanted to, for instance, enforce a certain right, such as, let's say that he's entitled to some pay, remuneration, or to, let's say, some conditions of service of the Auditor General whilst at the time that he acted, a court of law may say that he is not entitled to those things, but the duties performed by him would be deemed to be valid in order not to create a constitutional crisis. And a third person can also sue him, and he will not be held to say that, the court has declared that my appointment was invalid, so I was not the Auditor General. That defense will not be available to him as well. So, in short, acts done by the Auditor General, including audits conducted by him and reports issued, are likely to be deemed to be valid acts done, just so that there was no constitutional crisis. Indeed, the Supreme Court did not go further to give consequential orders or directions. It made only declaratory reliefs. It gave declaratory relief saying that, okay, this person has not been validly appointed. But it doesn't say that, your appointment was invalid, cease to be the Auditor General from this date and all of that. So it leaves room for the executive to try to find a way to regularize the appointment before it is too late.
And so there won't be any illegality attached to the reports that have been undertaken by him because, for instance, the argument which is rare in its head is that the COVID report, for instance, which the government continues to argue about that they did nothing wrong. Someone, a private individual, could pick up that document and head towards the Supreme Court to say that all of the work done here, the person who undertook the work was not qualified or shouldn't have been in the position to start off with, and as such, all of that work be declared null and void. You say that there isn't a potential of that happening.
Ultimately, the court will have to decide what it thinks. But my respectful opinion is that the court is likely to say that, notwithstanding that the appointment was not done in accordance with law, notwithstanding that his appointment was unconstitutional, the acts performed by him will be deemed, which means not really proper, but deemed to be, just so as not to create a constitutional crisis. Now, the answer is that we have to be aware of the fact that the Auditor General doesn't perform these functions by himself. They have the Audit Service, and there is the Audit Service Board that superintends over the Audit Service, so that officers of the Audit Service that go to perform these functions, it will be very difficult for a court of law to say that those functions performed by Audit Service staff are also unconstitutional simply because there's a signature on the report from the Auditor General himself. It is likely to lead to some constitutional crisis, and I think that the courts, the Supreme Court in particular, wanted to probably avert that. That is why it did not descend further to give consequential orders. For instance, to say that any act performed by the Auditor General was invalid, or to say that from this date, the Auditor General had no power to act and monies paid to him in the form of remuneration should be refunded. If the Supreme Court had made such express consequential orders and somebody, for instance, the President failed to abide by them, that could be even a ground for the removal of the President from office. And if the President or anybody concerned could be liable for committing high crime and could go to jail for 10 years. But the Supreme Court didn't give those express directions.
Right.
It only gave declaratory reliefs as to the constitutionality or otherwise of the appointment of the new Auditor General and the constitutionality or otherwise of the the directive to Domelevo to proceed on leave.
Right. I appreciate that you could provide this education for us this afternoon.
The pleasure, sir.
That's Vitus Bang. He is a private legal practitioner speaking to us this afternoon. And just by way of information as well, labor groups are this afternoon meeting the finance ministry as part of conversations in relation to the government debt restructuring. We know, or you would recall, that the government exempted pension funds amongst many other things from its domestic debt exchange program, and so there's a meeting between government and the labor groups. We'll bring you details from that meeting as and when we do have it, but that's our bulletin for this afternoon. It came to you live from our studios here at Adesawi Kanda. A lot more news as always if you log on to 3news.com. Nanekia Mensah Aborampah, she's ready on standby to bring us the very latest from the world of business. I am Eric Mawuena Egbeta.
Very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us on Business Daily on 3FM 92.7. Coming up this afternoon, renowned economist Kwame Pianim urges government to declare a state of emergency even as it implements IMF policies to bring down public debt. And Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors raises concerns over unfair regulatory practices which says are affecting members. We have the details in the next 10. Please stay. My name is Nana Akua Mensah Aborampah. Let's get to the details. As renowned economist Kwame Pianim has reiterated calls for governments to consider cutting down expenditure even as it implements an IMF program, reacting to government's $3 billion deal with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. Mr. Pianim told 3 Business, government must demonstrate a commitment to tackling its wasteful expenditures.
We should review a whole lot of our expenditures, not think the way we are thinking, and some of it is symbolic. Okay, there are 2 things. Symbolic cutting, that will encourage the bilateral donors and our development partners to say that we are serious, want to do something about this expenditure sprees, and then borrowing sprees that always land us in IMF programs. And then the second one is cutting deeply to ensure that our revenues cover the interest on our debt, which means that whenever we borrow, we are going to borrow on some of it on projects that will create a stream of income that will then help us to finance and pay for whatever we borrow.
And that was a renowned economist Kwame Pianim there. Now, let's talk about issues coming up with regards to the Ghana Revenue Authority and collection of revenues. Effective June 6, if you import goods in commercial quantities, you'll be charged 12.5% of customs value for the goods before you can clear them from the ports. Assistant Commissioner at the Large Taxpayer Office of the Ghana Revenue Authority, Dr. Martin Yabonja, made this known, adding that this upfront VAT payment is necessary to create uniformity in prices.
We have amended the VAT Act to take care of those who are importing goods in commercial quantity. So in addition to whatever taxes you have paid at the point of importation, you are asked to pay 12.5% of the custom value of the goods as an upfront VAT. The main objective, number 1, is to bring about compliance. And then number 2, we also want to bring about uniformity and parity in terms of the pricing. Because when somebody is registered for VAT and another person is not registered for VAT, because VAT is an indirect tax, the person who is registered for VAT will definitely charge a higher price than the person who is not registered. So if you are not compliant, the first thing is that you will not even be allowed to clear the goods from the port. Then you could also be denied of certain things. But domestically, it will come to find out that you are not registered. You can be prosecuted.
And that was the Assistant Commissioner at the Large Taxpayer Office of the Ghana Revenue Authority, Dr. Martin Yabonja. And still at the authority, that is the GRA, the Deputy Commissioner of Operations at the authority, Daniel Edisi, is cautioning businesses in the country to ensure they do not tamper with the EVAT system as they risk sanctions when apprehended. Already some arrests have been made since the policy was introduced this year. He spoke to the media on the sidelines of an event organized by the Chartered Institute of Taxation.
Like a system, when you introduce it, people would like to cut corners, so to speak. But we are assuring Ghanaians and the tax-paying public that we are up to the tax and we will come after those who are doing that. Quite recently, we had to apprehend some of them. And Those who are ready or who are trying to beat the system, we will come after them. And that is my honest truth, honest warning, so to speak, to them. Because without revenue mobilization in Ghana, there's no way that we can be able to grow this country, to take us from where we find ourselves now.
Daniel DC is the Deputy Commissioner of Operations at the Ghana Revenue Authority. Let's look at some updates on the IMF as the fund has shed light on the country's debt situation and the progress made in restructuring efforts. While Ghana's debt distress has been a cause for concern, the report highlights the completion of a significant portion of the domestic debt restructuring process and outlines the government's strategy for achieving debt sustainability. With the IMF support and the implementation of appropriate policies, Ghana aims to restore a moderate risk of debt distress by 2028. The IMF says Ghana's debt restructuring efforts show promise in tackling debt distress situation, and these developments provide a glimmer of hope for the country's economic recovery. The IMF report again emphasizes the effectiveness of authorities' debt restructuring strategy, which combines with ongoing reforms as expected to yield positive outcomes by eliminating all breaches under the lower income countries debt sustainability framework. By 2028, Ghana aims to achieve debt sustainability and restore a moderate risk of debt distress, and that also cushions the calls by renowned economist Kwame Pianim for government to consider cutting down on expenditure as the IMF implements the program and with these structures that have come on board. Let's see how that turns out for our policymaker. But away from that, bulk oil distributing companies have raised concerns over what they say is unfair regulatory practices in the industry. The situation, according to them, has resulted in losses of over $1 million to members. CEO of the chamber, Patrick Ufori, tells 3 Business a number of his members are incurring huge demurrage costs through no fault of theirs.
Some of our members calling in to complain about the distortion in the Lakans, that boss having priority over them, and that virtually the inefficiencies in boss in their inability to plan well quarterly in order to know we are landing the cargoes on these particular days. They don't do that. They come in and then they give them preferential treatment to have access to the CBM to discharge at the expense of the private sector, who some of them have also joined the queue. We're pushing clearly, and we are currently engaging MPA that we want to know exactly what it is that they are doing about the lake, and we want to at least have the next quarter Lakans published so that we can all plan, and then also have some level of assurance that they are going to comply to that. We also expect the regulator to crack the whip so that those BDCs who haven't even paid their license fees or haven't really meet all the regulatory requirements, we need to streamline the system and ensure.
And you heard the voice of Patrick Ofori. He is the CEO of the Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors. But remember, when you log on to 3news.com, we have more business news updates. Black Rasta will return shortly with some more reggae vibes. My name is Nana Akua, Mensah Aborampah. Enjoy your lunch and have a good afternoon.